Hello, everyone on the channel. I'm here today with Thomasin Langlands. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
That's correct, yes. Who I'm going to be conducting an interview with today, talking about, well, the show and her experiences of working on Kevin Spencer. Whatever you're comfortable with sharing, of course.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a
so
long
first and
time
foremost.
ago, so
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I know. So first and foremost, Thomasin, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
So I was just going to tell Thomasin about how this all started up. So I started a YouTube channel dedicated to Kevin Spencer when I was, I think, 11 years old. This was in like 2008. And I amassed quite a few subscribers to this channel, and now I realized like the subscribers are just sitting there and not really having any content. So I decided to conduct some interviews with some of the people who worked on the show, and just trying to get their stories about creating Kevin Spencer. So
Yeah.
So today I would just like to hear with you like what you're up to nowadays, and like how Kevin Spencer came to be a thing, how you got involved in it, and just like a few questions regarding the show.
Well, I started on Kevin, well, really at the very beginning, and I started in it was really small. There were about five of us, right? And
Okay.
um, it was like I have some very fond memories of the early episodes. In the very early episodes, none of the characters ever swore, right? It was,
Okay.
and as it went on over the years, it became more vulgar. But there was this I really, in the very beginning, the juxtaposition of the violence of Kevin's life, coupled with the fact that there was never any, like, there were no vulgarities used. It was like weirdly clean while being at the
Okay.
same time like sort of such a harsh reality, right? And the early, like, we early on, we took sort of, Greg had done drawings, if I remember correctly, and we worked sort of with his style in the very early days. And then as it went on, as the show progressed, it became sort of, the imagery became much cleaner, much less childlike, right? The artists
Okay.
that he was able to hire for the show, like,
Oh
just
yeah.
became so much, they had a higher skill level, right? Than early on.
Uh,
There was so it was the sort of the transition of the show from beginning to end. And of course, the early episodes were all written by Greg. He was like sort of, um, and but it was fun. So I started in the sort of doing more and in the animation department, and it was in the first year, and they'd hired someone else to do the voice of Mom. Like, I
okay.
wasn't the original voice of Mom. They'd hired someone else to do the voice of Mom, and I was working in I was sort of doing more of the drawing and the animation,
Mhm.
and they sort of, the room around the office was that they weren't happy with the voice. They just weren't
Okay.
happy with the voice, and so I'd never done really. I think I'd done just sort of casually for a show called Travels with Mom. I'd done a very small voiceover, but I hadn't really ever done any voice work. And I asked if I could try. Can I
Okay.
try? And I just try it. And so I just went in and I tried it. And then we went back. I can't remember if we revoiced all the early episodes or if you go back far enough. I think the woman had a bit of a Southern accent when she started.
Okay.
It's a little vague in my memory, but then it
So
just went
yeah.
from there.
So before you made a voice for Anastasia, you were involved in was it like storyboard or
So later I did the storyboards.
okay, I
So
see.
early on there were no storyboards. Early on it was like there were three of us in one room doing all the drawing for
Okay.
the episodes. It was like it was very small.
Hmm.
It was I think in the first season, and I apologize if I'm wrong and I've left somebody out, but I'm pretty sure it was just me and Mike Wetmore and Sean Cousin were doing. It was just the three of us, and we were doing the sort of the drawings in the end, and the. I mean, animation is a very generous word for what those early episodes were, right? They were just sort of a series of pictures more.
Yeah.
So it's really small. And so, yeah, that's
Okay.
what I was doing. And then in the second, I think it was the second season. It was the second or the third season. I think it was the second season. So when I was pregnant when I first started voicing Mom, and in the second season, I asked if I could do storyboards instead, because then I could do them from home.
Okay.
So I was able to work from home with my newborn daughter, and then I just came in and did voice. And for the rest of Kevin, I did for the the next 6 years, I did the storyboards and the voicing.
Okay, I see. And from what I recollect, season 1 began in something like 1998. Or maybe later.
Yes, my daughter was born in 99, so definitely 98.
Okay, yeah. And prior to season 1, Kevin Spencer was like, a few shorts that were on, I think, Mondo Media or like Burly Bear Network or something.
Yeah, and I think that was all just Greg. It was Greg,
okay,
right? Yeah,
so
I think those very early days. Yeah.
So you started around like when the first season began.
Yeah, when the first, I don't know, what was it, 13 episodes? When the first 13 episode season started is when I started. Yeah.
And you were there all the way from the beginning until the end, with season 8.
Till the very, from the very beginning till the very end. Yeah. So it was a great 7 years. It was a great show to work on. It was it was a lot of fun. It was fun, and it was I liked. I got a lot of freedom, and that was really nice. And you just sort of, the character, when you go into voice the character, for me anyway, the character just sort of became. It was just that she was just there, right? Somebody that right?
Okay.
And there was to to start the character, to get into character, there was a single line that I would do every time I walked into the studio, and to go from me, because obviously I don't sound like the character that Kevin. And the line was, it was, Jesus, what's a girl got to do to get a cavity switch around here? And that sort of, from there, I could do whatever, like I could say whatever she had to say, right? And then like there's sometimes when you're reading a line, it's like, she would never say this like this. This is not how this person would say this, right?
I gotta admit, when I started talking to you a few minutes ago, I was like, did you make the voice for Anastasia? But now, wow, now I hear it. Wow.
Yeah. And in the early seasons, in the very early seasons, there was no money, right? And so I think Mike Wetmore voiced about 90% of the male voices, and I voiced about 90% of the female voices I think it was just sort of the first half of the first season, until more funding came in, and then they were able to get more people. But it was and it was funny, because in those early episodes, I was, like I said, I was pregnant, and by the end of the first season, I must have been close to 9 months pregnant. And Greg got to the point where he was like, I can't be in the studio while you're recording, because it is so disturbing. It was so disturbing to him to hear me do the voice while being just being 30 years old and 9 months pregnant, or in my early 30s and 9 months pregnant. It was just, he said that the dichotomy of it was just too much for him.
Okay.
So.
And then Mike Whitmore, from what I remember, he did the voice for Alan the Magic Goose primarily, and also a bunch of other male cast.
Uncle Charlie, I think. Uncle Charlie too.
Yeah. Charlie Plant.
Charlie Plant. And then early on, Mike did a lot of voices early on. He did a lot of the male voices early on.
Okay.
He was very good at it. Yeah.
Did you?
And he also worked. in early on too, Mike worked the first year, the first season. I think Mike worked a bit on the animation too.
Okay, I see. Did you provide any other voices than just Anastasia?
Yeah, in the early episodes I did, and even later on the occasional one. But none of them were recurring characters. They were all just one-offs, right? If there was
Okay,
just a couple lines here or a couple lines there,
I see.
I would do that. But yeah,
Do you remember that you actually played yourself in an episode?
no, I'd forgotten that.
Okay, there's this Christmas episode at the end of season 6. If you, I don't know if you've seen the other interviews that I've uploaded thus far with Serge and with Rick Colbars.
Yeah.
But in the thumbnails, I added their their animated counterparts from that episode.
Okay. And so I played myself in that episode. Serge and I had talked about it, and I remembered that he had played himself, and I actually remember the drawing of him, but I
Okay,
didn't remember that I played myself in that episode.
okay. I might be wrong.
But you might be
Perhaps,
right
yeah.
too. I mean, I may just not remember. That was a while ago.
Yeah, but after the interview, I can just send you a screenshot of who I think is you, and then
Yeah,
if it's okay with you, I would like to use that in the thumbnail to the video.
yeah, yeah. Of course, that's no problem at all.
I just got to ask,
Yeah.
what did you think about Anastasia as a character?
I thought she was a great character. I mean, she was like Greg's characters, although there was a simplicity to the show, the characters were actually, they had a bizarre complexity to them, right? I think it's what made
Yeah,
the show charming. It's what made it interesting is, I mean, she was very, yeah, she was just, I don't know. It was, she was fun. She was a really fun character to do, right? It was just, it's so, well, not me, um, right? It's very different, right? It's not me at all, right?
yeah,
And so it was just, it was interesting. It was fun, and a lot of the interactions that she had with, like the interactions that she had with Percy or Charlie, it was, they were amusing, right? Right?
okay.
It's just, it was very amusing. I don't know that it's funny, like I've watched very few episodes in their entirety, right? Like
Hmm.
I know a lot of the episodes because storyboarding them, you really have to know what's happening. And there were periods of time when sort of episodes were being written by, sometimes Rick would write an episode and sometimes Greg would write an episode. And in doing the storyboards, you have to, like storyboards, uh, they basically play a really big role in continuity, right? So you have to
Yeah.
be, one of the things you're thinking about, like storyboards, for me anyway, and I don't know this is true for everybody who does storyboards, but storyboards for me, it's like it's very helpful if you can draw, to do them, but it's much more important to be able to see written words sort of as a three-dimensional setting, because it's like, I don't think it's something that people think about much, but when someone walks in a room, like you're describing somebody and they're walking into the room and they're maybe getting something out of the fridge and then something else happens and somehow they're not where they can't possibly be
Mm.
doing that next thing because they're not in the right place, or you can't have an over the shoulder shot because it just doesn't physically work in the space, right? And
Okay.
or it's not how it would work. And so like that, for me, doing the storyboards was sort of much more about kind of putting together a word puzzle into what would be a three-dimensional space.
Okay.
And then the two writers, Rick and Greg, had slightly different styles,
Mm.
and sort of trying to use a storyboard to marry their two styles of writing, especially in the description, and so that there was continuity generally through the episodes. And that's, yeah, And so that was really the fun part of it. It's a puzzle, right? You're kind of,
Okay.
it's a puzzle, and you're trying to see I don't know if I'm describing it well, but you're trying to see sort of the word puzzle in a three-dimensional space, and how people have to move in order for the scenes to play out in a coherent manner.
Okay. Well, I can sort of imagine.
Yeah.
Like
And the
how?
first
Yeah.
season, that didn't exist. There were no storyboards in the first season.
Okay. How did the process of storyboarding usually play out for you? Did you like receive the script beforehand, and then you
So
try to
I
pass it?
would
Yeah.
get the script. Yeah. So Greg would write the script, and then I would get the script, and I would do the storyboards, and then the storyboards would go to the animators. And
Okay.
often there were time crunches, right? And so it's like you're sending things out. Sometimes I wouldn't even get the whole script at once, right? Like if there was a delay for whatever reason on the writer's end, I might not get the whole script, and then you're getting script in pieces, and you can't read through the whole script to find out. And so you're sort of getting it in little chunks, and that presents other challenges, but usually it was pretty good, and we just, everybody worked and we got it done. And then it would
Okay.
go to the animators. And my goal was just that they never sent it back with any complaints, right?
Okay. Nice.
Right.
Are there any
Yeah.
particular
So
episodes that you remember working on, or that you remember fondly?
um just one of the most bizarre episodes was the singing liver episode. That was really
Oh yeah,
weird. That was a
the
really weird
musical.
episode. The musical. That was entertaining to do. The musical one. That was
Yeah.
later on, but it was that one was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
kind of remember them more in rather than individual episodes, more as in like the eras of Kevin, because
Mhm.
as the show got more funding, more people got hired, and it became a more complicated show. And so early on, like even if you I find that even if you look at the episodes, it's almost like you see these different sort of the stages of Kevin, right? As Kevin
Mm.
sort of progresses through the through the era, anyway. But
Okay.
specific episodes, yeah, I don't have a lot of them. I don't. They're not a lot that kind of all blur together for me,
I see. And this was a
except for
long
the
time ago, of course.
yeah. Yeah, it would have. Well, it started in '98. It ran 7 years, so it would have been 2005. So
Yeah.
it's almost 20 years ago. Yeah, it's a long
Yeah.
time ago.
Yeah. How did you feel about the show finally coming to an end?
Well, it's a bit always bittersweet, right? Like
Mm.
it was a great show to work on. It was a job that I loved, but it was a great group of people to work with. It was a great show to work on, and when it came to an end, it's sort of sad that it's ending, but the timing was right, and I think that it had kind of come to a conclusion, right?
Mm.
I don't know if do you know the expression "jump the shark"?
Yeah.
To jump the shark and it's from the Happy Days. I don't
Oh
feel
yeah.
as though I feel as though kept kind of successfully ended before jumping the shark,
Okay, I see. Yeah.
right? Yeah. So the timing was, I think it had said all it had to say, and so I think the timing was good. Um, it was just sort of time to do something else. But
Yeah.
I yeah. So it was a good 7 years.
Yeah.
It was a great 7 years. Yeah.
After you worked on Kevin Spencer, have you had, any other jobs where you worked with, voice acting or creating storyboards
The
or?
truth is, no, no. Um, my life took a bit of a different turn, I guess. So as Kevin Spencer was ending, my daughter was in. She was in grade one. Kevin Spencer ended just before the Christmas after my daughter started grade one, and in the middle of grade one, she came home from school one day and told me that she wanted to be homeschooled. And
Okay.
my first response was sort of no, But then I started to think about it, and Kevin was coming to an end, which meant that I could just not look for work for a little while, and we could give it a try. And if it failed, she could go back to school the next year. So I pivoted from Kevin to homeschooling my child,
Okay.
and she like really working as a facilitator for her, so that I didn't I never looked back, and I never went back to that sort of thing. I moved on to a lot of other different stuff, but not animation and not storyboards anymore.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. So
Oh, well, what was like the average day like working at it's called Ocnus Productions?
Agnes Productions. So after the first season, I worked from home, and so that
Hmm.
we lived about 45 minutes from the studio,
Hmm?
and so I would come in to do the first, yeah, and then we moved in closer till we were only about 10 minutes away. But I went into the office once a week to drop off the storyboards.
Hmm.
Um, I was emailed the script. I think we were at the state. I think technology had regressed to the point where I was getting the script by email, or I was picking it up. Maybe I had to go in and pick it up. But
Okay.
I would, go in once a week, pick up script, and go home and work in my own space and just draw pictures. I just
Okay.
just sort of on my own schedule. It was at a time when work from home wasn't a thing. I was
Oh
really
yeah.
lucky to be able to work from home, and so it was, yeah. And so the the later on, there were a lot of animators working on the show. There was one point where, and you go from a production where there are really 5 or 6 of you, and you know everybody quite well, and then it grew and grew and grew, and you've got a whole room full of animators that you've just you don't know them, you don't really meet them. You just go in and you drop off your storyboards, and they just tell you what they need, and you make sure you get it done. But it's not the it just got bigger, right?
Okay. Sounds like it
And
was
so
a very
I
big,
wasn't
yeah.
yeah. Well, it's still a very small production. It was always a very small
Okay.
production, but it was a super, super little one when we started. And yeah, and so that I didn't spend a lot of time at Oculus, but Oculus shared a building with Atomic Productions, which was my
Hmm.
husband's studio.
Oh yeah.
So
Okay.
I was in and out relatively often because of that. Um, but just
Okay. I see. So you like started with what was it 3 people, and then
yeah. Well, it
like
was a few.
yeah, or five
Yeah,
or something.
at the
Yeah.
very beginning, it was like I mean, it was more than 3 people, but I think it was fewer than 10. I don't
Hmm,
think there were
okay.
that many. Like if I really started, well, if you start, if you count audio engineers, but you say a dozen to 15 people early on.
Hmm,
They're just two, and then by the end, I don't know how many animators they had working on it, but it was a whole room full of people.
okay.
Right. Yeah.
How did it feel that the show you worked on and that in the beginning has such a a small scale, like all of a sudden expanded into something relatively massive, as it sounds like.
Yeah, well, it was really nice to it's nice to see the success for Greg, right? I mean, it was
Hmm.
Greg grew the show, and it was nice to see that, to see something small grow into something bigger, and it was certainly, I think, a good stepping stone for him moving into the future. And it was just it is good to see, right? It's good to see it growing. That's what you want, right? When something starts to, and if it hadn't grown, I suspect, like, I don't think it could have. I don't know how long it. Like, I think it needed to grow to continue to exist, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't. I think if it hadn't grown, if it hadn't changed, I don't think it would have lasted, right? I think that's part of why
Yeah.
it was able to last. And I know, like, yeah, I have a vague memory of there being at some point there was. I think it aired on the CBC until there were complaints about the language. Like
Oh yeah,
people wrote in and complained about the vulgarities in the show.
yeah, I heard
Uh,
about that.
yeah, yeah. People were.
Did
It
you?
was a more
Yeah.
sensitive time.
Okay. Did you at any point have any like fan interactions? Did people recognize you?
No, not really. There are a couple people have. There've been a couple times where someone's reached out on Facebook and asked if I am the. It's not. I have a somewhat unusual name, and so that I've had a couple of people reach out on Facebook and ask if I am that Thomasin Langlands. Um, but no, other than that, people don't recognize me.
Okay,
Although
I
I
see.
did go out as Anastasia. I did make an Anastasia costume one year for Halloween. I did go out
Oh,
as
you did.
Anastasia one year. I went to a Halloween party as Anastasia. That was
Wow.
fun.
Were you asked to make any Anastasia impressions?
From time to time I have been, yeah. Yeah, sure. When people learn, because the voice is so different from my own, right? The voice, it
Yeah,
doesn't, it's not me, right? And so people who don't believe it, people who are surprised, right?
yeah.
Uh,
How popular would you say that Kevin Spencer was at its like peak? I'm from Sweden, and Kevin Spencer is completely unknown here, so I don't really have any idea of how big of
Popular
a
it was.
phenomenon the show was. Yeah.
It it had I think it had a pretty specific demographic. Um, and so I think there's I, I think there's, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it is one of the longest running sitcoms, because technically, even though it's a cartoon, it's a sitcom. I think it's one
Yeah.
of the longest running sitcoms in Canadian history.
Yeah, I heard
Um,
that too.
yeah, that's its little claim to fame. Um, and so that it was popular because it just kept going, right? Um,
Yeah.
and but I think it was popular with a demographic that I don't have a lot. Like I think it was popular with young boys.
Okay.
I think that was its demographic, right?
That's probably why I got
I
into
don't,
it.
yeah, it wasn't, let's say at that time, my circle was new moms, young moms.
Oh, I
It
see.
was not a hit with young moms, right? I was,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
nobody in my mommy and me group was watching it,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah. Are you like still in contact with any of the people that you used to work with during that time?
Well, Serge,
Yeah, okay,
very
obviously,
much
Serge.
so.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, obviously Serge, but not really anybody else. Every now and again, we hear from Mike. Serge is in contact with a couple of the people who worked on it just because of like through work. He still occasionally interacts with them through work, but
Oh yeah.
no, we moved. We don't really live in the same area anymore. We moved a couple hours south of where we were living, of where the show was produced, and we're no, I'm not really in contact with anyone who used to
Okay,
work
I
on the
see.
show.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
heard Serge was in contact with a few of a few of the people, and
yeah,
I messaged him a bit, and we talked a little bit about Serge trying to hook me up with those people for interviews.
yeah. Like I did. Sarah's is definitely still in contact with Dave and Mike.
Yeah.
Dave Bigelow and Mike Wetmore, without a doubt. Yeah, but no, I don't. I don't have much. I don't have much occasion to be in contact with any of them.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
So, Anastasia has a pretty, special voice. Did you receive any sort of like voice training in order to make that sort of
No,
voice?
no, uh, no. I've always like since I was a kid, I like to play. Sort of, I like the idea of different voices, and I like to play with different voices. And you read. I read stories to my nieces and nephews and my own child, and I did them in. You just choose different voices. It's just just, I think it's something that some people do and other people don't, right? Like different
Okay.
voices, different languages, different accents have sort of really unique rhythms, right? That
Yeah.
are that can be fun to play with. And it was just, I don't know. And with Anastasia, I just, the voice I used for her, I just, it was a funny thing because I remember the woman who did the voice initially, and I remember listening to her,
Hmm?
and I remember thinking, like, I just, I felt that it was just the wrong voice. Like,
Okay.
and I felt that this, like, I felt relatively strongly that this was Anastasia's voice, that that was her voice. That is exactly what
Okay.
she should sound like. That was who she was, right? Um, Sort of, she was a chain smoker, so it needed to be rougher. And the voice sessions, like if the voice sessions were long enough, if there was enough dialogue in the script that the voice sessions went on long enough, by the end of it, my voice would be so hoarse because
Oh, I see.
it's like a voice it comes from here, like it comes from a very low place, and you kind of have to like, yeah, sort of, you have to contort, I don't know, your vocal cords in a way that by the end of it, I
Oh,
would like barely be able to talk sometimes when it was, if
oh,
it was a
I see.
longer voice session.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can imagine it would be pretty straining to speak like that for a long
Yeah.
time.
For an extended period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But it was fun.
yeah, yeah. How did you feel about singing in the musical episode? From what I remember, you had I think Anastasia had a number.
I think she did. I barely remember it. Like I remember the episode, but I barely remember recording the singing. I just like always, whenever you open your mouth to sing, I'm always, pretty certain I'm going to be out of tune, out of key, right? Sort of my insecurities on my ability to carry a tune, I think, overwhelmed all my other thoughts about doing that episode.
I see. I do remember one song that was something like "Here, there, and everywhere. It don't matter if I'm
Oh
here or
yeah,
there." But it was so long ago since I watched that episode.
yeah, that's vaguely familiar. I,
Okay.
yeah, and the singing liver, that was bizarre. The singing
Oh
liver was
yeah.
bizarre.
Who made a voice for the
Yeah.
singing liver? Was that Rick? I know I spoke to someone about that. No,
That's
no,
a
I
really
don't
good
know.
question. It could have been Serge. Serge might have
Yeah, it
been the
was.
liver.
Yeah, it was probably Serge. Yes, I think
Yeah.
so because I remember
Yeah.
during one of the past interviews that we talked about that scene. So
Yeah. I
bizarre.
think it was him. I can't guarantee it, but I think it was him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there anything in your while working on Kevin Spencer that you found particularly challenging?
The most challenging aspect of it was always making the continuity,
Hmm.
making sure that was always the most challenging thing, to make sure that it all kind of held together and it made, like, the way the scene was being described, and making sure that it all held together, because, like, for the writers, I think the dialogue was always their priority, right? Because it's a very
Okay.
dialogue driven show.
Yeah.
So that I think the writers, they were concentrating on the dialogue, and the sort of the details of people's placement in the room and all that. It's just less of a priority for them. And so
Hmm.
the challenging part was to make sure that what they had written could actually translate into a scene where people move
Hmm.
around in a room together and are interacting physically. And, if the refrigerator is on your left when you come into the room and you turn around, it has to then be on your right,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah.
like sometimes that, like, if you're excited about what the characters are saying and you're thinking about sort of the bigger picture finale, I think sometimes as a writer, for that can kind of fall by the wayside, right? And so it's just sort of sort of putting it back together and going, and that, that didn't happen that often, but that would be sort of like piecing the puzzle together.
Okay.
So that it becomes coherent in its 3D form was always would have been the most challenging aspect. But other than that, it was just, and sometimes there were deadline challenges, right? Like sometimes if something because there's always like the audio post is always sort of the last place to catch up time. So the show has a deadline, right? So the show has a strict deadline, and as depending on where you are in the line, right, of who's getting what, you might have to play catch up, right? So there were a number of times where sort of like I was supposed to have 2 weeks to do an episode. I was always supposed to have 2 weeks to do an episode, but often I had 1 or 4 days, right? Like 1 week or 4 days or 6. So like that time crunch, and then trying to get it done and to the animators in time, right? And so like everybody, if there's a slowdown at the beginning, then everybody is going to feel that time crunch, and then it's going to be the worst on the audio post guys because they come last. And so trying to absorb some of that time delay sort of at my stage, so that to give everybody else a little more breathing room, right?
Okay.
To try to always be, and that's part of that is just my personality. I take deadlines incredibly seriously.
Okay.
And so if I got the whole script 3 days before the deadline, my goal was always to complete it on time, even if I got it late. And so sometimes that was challenging.
I see. But, how long? Yeah. How long did it usually take to complete a script for one episode?
Usually I had 2 weeks to do it.
2 weeks. Okay.
The time was supposed to be 2 weeks. I was supposed to have 2 weeks to complete the script.
I see.
If I remember correctly, it was 2 weeks, which is that's a nice amount of time. 2 weeks was a lovely amount of time. Yeah. But sometimes that got crunched down to 4 days. But then you just do what you do. Do what you do to get it out on time, right?
Yeah. And those 2 weeks, was that for providing the voice, or was it also providing the storyboard?
So that was for the storyboard, and the voice was usually every I would usually do, if I remember correctly, I think it was one episode at a time. You just go into the studio and you record the episode until you're done, right? And in the beginning, in the earlier episodes, there were more takes, right? Like there are more takes, but by the time we got to the end, you just know the character so well that you just go in and it just sort of flows out, right? Because you're not having, by the end, like in the beginning, you're learning who the character is, right? So would they say it this way, or would they say it this way, or where would the pause be, and how would, right? But by the time the last season came around, it was just, I knew the character. And so I knew exactly how the character would say just about everything. And so you could just really just go in and read the script.
Okay.
Right. Like, and because I did the storyboards, the recordings always came after the storyboards. So by the time I was going in to do the voice recording, I had a pretty solid idea of what was happening in the episode. And I'd already sort of formed some opinions about the dialogue, my character's dialogue. And so that, it wasn't like, I wasn't just seeing the script for the first time when I came into this. I'd been quite familiar with it.
Okay. So it sounds like during the later era of Kevin, you could immerse yourself a bit more in the character, and maybe it came more naturally what you were going to say. Yeah,
because after 2-3 years, the character just feels like part of you. Like, right? It's just part of, it's just like this, you're very connected to it, right? That's how I felt anyway. That for me, I became connected to the character, and that, just someone really well, right? She just became somebody that I felt I knew very, very well.
I
right?
see. How did it feel
Yeah.
like, Anastasia, she curses a lot, says pretty nasty things. How did that feel for you?
Well, I grew up in New Jersey, so I was no stranger to foul language. So it just didn't
Okay,
it didn't bother me at all.
I
It
see.
was just how she talked, right? And it's funny because it was at a time where, like, it was during my child's first 6 years of life.
Hmm.
So there was no swearing in my house. Like, nobody, there was, my child was very small, and you don't want to expose your young child to foul language. So you make an effort when they're little, even if you had more of a potty mouth in your younger days, you make an
Hmm.
effort when your child is small to not swear, right? And so
Yeah, okay.
it was a funny balance, because here I was doing this character who swore all the time, and whereas at home there was no swearing going on. So
Okay,
that
I
was
see.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. And so yeah, I think we're gonna wrap up the interview pretty soon.
Okay.
I was gonna ask, is uh, like, what are you up to nowadays? Is there anything you're comfortable with sharing?
Yeah. I took quite a pivot after doing Kevin. And after, I homeschooled my child for a little while, and then I have been doing a very strange combination of construction projects and sort of studying the stock market and macroeconomics. So it's got
Okay,
absolutely nothing to do with voice work and that sort of thing. It's just
I
sort
see.
of more having the freedom to follow the things that I'm really interested in, and
Okay,
that's a lot of fun. Yeah,
so you took a whole other turn after doing Kevin. It
yeah.
sounds like it.
After doing Kevin, yeah, right after Kevin, I took about 7 years off, and I think I did, like, sort of one or two smaller projects in there, but nothing serious. And then it was sort of, and during that time, because I had the freedom, that's when I developed an interest in sort of the markets and
Hmm.
learning how they work, learning better how they work, and learning about, how to read company spreadsheets and stuff like that. And so yeah, just pivoted in a completely different direction.
I
So
see.
no regrets. Yeah,
Yeah, that's how life can be
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. It is. It's good. Keeps life interesting, being able to
Yeah.
pivot. Yeah.
Before we wrap up, are there any other like memories you have from the time working on Kevin, or any fun facts or anything you want to share?
Any fun Kevin facts? No, I don't. I can't think of any off the top of my head. It was just.
Hmm.
It was a good time. Like, it was a good era. It was a good period. It was a good.
Hmm.
It was a good time. It was a time, like, there was that. I don't know. Just at that time, that particular industry, and it all felt very vibrant. It had a very
Okay.
vibrant. It all felt very
Hmm.
alive and very vibrant. And it was an interesting time to be there, and it was a privilege to get to work on it. Like,
Hmm.
it was it was a really interesting experience to have had, and it was a lot of fun to do. It was really a
Okay.
lot of fun to do. Yeah, the good
It's-
working with good people, and yeah.
Ah, it sounds really nice. It sounds like you had a
Yeah,
blast working on the show, and that you had a lot of
I
nice people that you
yeah,
work with.
nice, yeah, good experiences, and it was a lot of fun. It was a show that was a yeah, it was a lot of fun to work on. And I don't think I would ever have had I don't think I would ever have done voice work otherwise, because, like, the idea of going to interviews I don't think I have the stomach for the rejection that most actors have to go through in order to get a job.
Okay.
Right. And so that I got the initial opportunity because I was there, right? And I was like, can I try? Right.
Yeah.
And so that afterwards I thought about, because by the end of Kevin, I was a member of the Actors Union at the Actor Guild. And I considered getting an agent and trying to get more voice work. But like when I started to think about the fact that it would just be like you'd have to go in and just be like rejection after rejection after rejection before you get something. I was just like, I don't think I have that in me. I don't think I'm up to experiencing. I don't think I can take that as a human being. I don't
Yeah.
think I can handle that.
I see.
Right?
Yeah, that
I mean,
can be very difficult, I
yeah.
can imagine.
Yeah, I think that actors that have to go through that, the actors that go through that to get work, there has to be like, that can't be easy, right?
Nah.
Because, or maybe for some people it is, I don't know, but for me it wouldn't have been. And so I never considered, not for only a few minutes did I consider the possibility of looking for future voice work in any serious way, trying to make a career out of it.
Yeah, I see. And it sounds like you found your path somewhere else. And
yeah, yeah, more solitary, a solitary path.
Yeah,
right.
That can be very nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Thomasin, I would like to thank you very much for for having this interview. It's been a blast talking to
thank
you, and also thanks
well, thank you for the opportunity. And it was
yeah.
Sorry.
No.
It was,
I just want to say that, yeah. Oh, this is the difficulty with Zoom. Like, people are always talking over one another.
yeah,
But
yeah. It's interesting to try to remember that time, right? Because
oh yeah,
it's 20 years ago that it ended, and so it's well, almost 20 years ago now that it came to a conclusion. And but yeah, it was nice to think about it for an hour.
Yeah.
Nice to spend an hour sort of thinking about that time.
Yeah, and it sounds like you recalled a lot from that time.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Well,
That bodes well for my memory. But
yeah.
I make no promises. I could have gotten a lot of things wrong, right?
After we finish the interview, I'm going to see if that was actually you that I saw in the Christmas episode. Maybe it was someone else.
It might be me.
Okay.
I genuinely don't remember.
Okay.
I genuinely don't remember. Now I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll send you a screenshot, and if it is you, then I would
Yeah.
like to use it in the thumbnail, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, you bet. No problem at all. All right.
Let's see. It's still recording. Perfect. So I'm gonna stop.